Jacob, welcome back to the show. So happy to have you here again.
Happy to be back, Ari. Good to see you.
It's great to have you back. We just had a short chat. We were talking about gaming and the old games from the 90s. There was something special about them, and you were starting to say about how they were special from a storytelling perspective. Tell me more.
Yeah, right. So back in our day, those kinds of games, like in the 80s and the 90s, they had to be more content driven, right? Because they
Yeah.
weren't heavy on the graphics, right? They weren't eye candy. They were mental candy, right? They brought us in, engaged the story. The characters actually meant something, and like, yeah, and you wanted to play it because you wanted to find out what was going to happen next with your characters, and when they died, your character dies, you're like, because you had invested so much time into that thing, you're like, oh,
But there's some magical beauty in the fact that actually the constraints, right? There were constraints on graphic. You were playing like just with your mouse point and click. We didn't have controllers back in the day. It was very basic. And would you agree that in certain way those constraints forced it to be better on content, better on storytelling?
absolutely, right. Absolutely. It kind of goes back to how do you make the best software people, right? You give them the slowest computer possible because then they have to make it really efficient, right? That's the best code ever. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Would you agree that we've lost something with the new games in the storytelling and these kind of elaborate characters that you've and I'll put indie games a little bit aside because I'm seeing that in indie games, but in kind of your mainstream games, except for, the really good ones like Witcher and like Zero Down, we've lost a little bit of that storytelling.
I think so, right? The real story that they're trying to tell now is all about commerce, right? Get you to the store, buy some stuff, to get a better experience, right? That's
Right.
kind of where they're moving towards, and I can understand why, because games are really expensive. They cost more than making a movie, right? Very expensive.
Right.
But
It's
at the
like
same
let's
time,
let's get three, four, $500 out of you, $1 at a time. What a business
exactly,
model.
right?
You know what? Personally, games back in the day or the good games, or even today, like the Zero Dawn, you pay $40, $50 and that's it. Like you get the game, you're done. I would rather pay the $50 for a really good game
Mhm.
than, have them, leech $1 at a time out of me, quite honestly.
I agree. I don't have a problem paying a hundred bucks for a game, knowing that it's a Bethesda game. It's gonna, they spent, 10, 12 years on that game. It's gonna
Yeah.
be really good, great experience, right? But then, they tack on the whole store and the commerce, and they nag you for money, money, money. You're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
It's
eh,
almost an unfair advantage, right? You don't feel like you're at par. Is there a game that you're kind of waiting for that you're excited about that's coming out soon or not so soon?
So let's see. I was waiting for Battlefield 6 because I
Yeah.
really like the Battlefield series, right? They're
Yeah.
very authentic and very real, right? And the new Battlefield 6 is very close quarter generated stuff, right? So it's back to the old CQ days of like Battlefield 4, So everyone's got shotguns and they're just running around with shotguns, right?
Right.
Which
Right.
is a lot of fun, right? It's very cathartic. But on the content side, what is it? Gosh, it escapes me now, but there was a new game and I was waiting for. Outer Limits, that's it, right? So Outer Limits
Mm,
2 came out, right?
nice.
So Obsidian makes really neat games that have a lot of good storyline content, right? And I just played Avowed, right? And I played the whole thing, and it got kind of weird at the end, but I think it's because it was a bit long for them, right? They had never really made a game that long. And so there's a certain amount of talent that you have to have in the storytelling side to make a
Right.
game that long, right? So I'm not saying they don't have the talent, it's just that it also takes time
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
a lot
That's
of
right.
practice,
Yeah.
which I don't have. I'm not a storyteller.
I think that's so true. The Witcher, for example, they're in this model of, the big story and then you have the side quests kind of philosophy. And I had a friend, I think The Witcher is one of the best games, made in the last 10 years. But my friend who played it, he got lost. He was like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what I'm doing next. He kind of got
Mhm.
lost in the side quests. So
Yeah.
there's definitely a balance and a complexity here to make the games
Mhm.
longer, but also keep them engaging where you're in the story. So I think that's a great point. Obviously, the hot topic nowadays is AI. We're seeing it changing industries, changing how software is built. You had a game company. It's really rewriting how software is built, and it doesn't seem to work quite yet. The agents are working, but not well. And it seems that you need to kind of master orchestrate the agents together to kind of get the good output. And
Mhm.
we talked about a few techniques that you're using. Let's start there. Where are the agents breaking? Right? Why don't they work?
Yeah. So I haven't used the orchestrated agents, right? Like at Cursor and stuff like that, because I haven't really seen good content come out, right? I've seen like, so for instance, I'll go to GPT-5, GPT-4 in the past, and I will ask it a question about writing code and it'll give me an answer that was mostly correct, right? There are times it gives me answers about an API that's not public, but it knows about it because it was able to get that code from somebody else, right? So like, that's always fun to see that. But where I see that these coding agents, where these chatbots fail, is that they really can't capture complex software systems, right?
Yes.
The whole context side of it is not big enough yet, or it's just not sophisticated enough yet for them to capture the whole essence of a very large enterprise level software, right? The small stuff in algorithm, things like that. I can get it to do DP coding all day long. It's great
Right.
at that, love it. But the big architecture stuff, it just like fails almost every time.
Yeah, that is so true. You wanted to work with an API. It's going to take you hours to learn that API, dozens of tests to test out the ambiguity in the API documentation that we all know is there. But you use Cursor to create just one API interface, and sure, it will fail 6 times until it gets it right, but it will do that in 3 minutes. And then you've got this API that just works, and it knows that it works because it's looking at the logs. So
Mhm.
there's something brilliant about it, but scaling that to full-fledged architectures, there's a
Mhm.
challenge there that I think that these companies will figure it out, but they're definitely not there yet.
Hey, Ari, do you remember in the 90s when aspect-oriented programming was a really big thing?
What was aspect oriented?
So
Was that Smalltalk or which one was
no,
that?
no, no. So the idea was that you got some libraries, right? So
Right.
you start with the premise that all the code that you ever need has already been written, right? Aspect. And so now what you want to do is you want to take that library and just get a piece of it, an aspect of it. And then you
Mm,
get another piece of a library and you chain them together and now you got a program, aspect oriented programming,
mm,
right? It was a really hot thing for like 1997, 98, right in there. Then it kind of died off. But the thing is like what we're doing today with like interacting with APIs is very much like aspect oriented programming, right? Very much like it.
right.
And so,
Right.
the thing that killed aspect is that, developers write code differently, right?
Right.
Different interface and stuff. But as chat starts to write all the code in the universe, guess what? It's all going to be written by the same developer. So you can resurrect the idea of aspect oriented programming. We can just like pull pieces from other projects, essentially, other runtimes and use it. Yeah.
Brilliant. I
Very
love
interesting.
that. I love that analogy.
Mhm.
Fast forward, and we don't know if this is 6 months here or 2 years or next or tomorrow, but
Mhm.
fast forward where agents are now have this capability to architect, not just to write a code snippet. And if you're going to be the architect and the orchestrator and you orchestrate different agents to do it correctly, it can be done today, and
Mhm.
that's what I'm doing. But the agents can't architect on their own. But if we fast forward to this is a paradigm shift. What are the software teams of the future going to look like? You're no longer going to have a back-end, front-end developer. Like that won't make sense in this future. What are software engineers going to learn? What are engineering schools going to teach? How do you see the next, I don't know, 5, 10 years, panning out?
Yeah. That's a fun topic, right? I really love that topic because I talk about it a lot. So I do some experiments just to see like what would an engineer look like in the future, right? So
Yeah.
I would go get like an excerpt from some marketing website and just dump it in the chat and say, make me a product that does this. And it does it, right? And it's like 60%, 50% accurate, right? Whatever. I did that to one of Andrew Ng's things, right? He had this thing for doing PDFs, right? So he had a marketing page. I took that marketing page, dumped in GPT, and then I dumped in the Quen, and Quen gave me a solution. And surprisingly, it worked. I mean, it was like 80%. Like, wow, okay. That's a little scary, but it's cool, right? So I think the future is going to be more about model based stuff, right? You're going to be like, I'm going to do the thing of like, it's like Star Trek, computer. I need to solve this problem. We need to do this algorithm to do this, and the computer and it does a thing, right? And gives
Right.
you a solution, right? Like you're doing, it's going to take more than just one agent. I can't just go to GPT-5 and say, give me this, right? GPT will give me something, which I know for a fact it'll give me something that's wrong, right? And I can iterate on it, but it'll just do a circle of wrong.
Right.
It's done
Right.
that to
Right.
me so many
I
times.
mean, the day that GPT is going to say, basically, you're going to have one quote unquote agent, and it's going to say, hey, this
Mhm.
task, I'm going to split it up into 10 different agents. here's the modules that each agent will work on. Here's how they will integrate. This is going to, because I'm using 10 agents, you have to have the super expensive license. Boom. And it's just going to work. Like that day is coming. It's going to have an experience of one agent, but it's going to spawn off maybe 100 agents because, for one task, it's going to try 3 different ways. So that's 3 different agents working in parallel, and then it will pick the best or merge them or whatever. So I know that day is coming, but we're not there yet. But I completely agree with your hypothesis. There's something really interesting that you said. The world of business is changing, right? If you're able to go and basically duplicate a concept or a business model from a code perspective, what that means is software is no longer a barrier to entrance because, what took old school, 3 years to do, maybe now you can do it in a month or 2. So software IP almost goes away from the world. So, this is a massive question, right? Like, are we going to start fighting back that, AI actually is IP and that ideas are IP? Or is that a lost battle and, whoever tries it is just going to lose? Or do we just need to adjust to the world where your software or your quote unquote intellectual property is just not a business barrier and you need to find other ways to hang on to your customers?
Yeah. The whole business argument is a really tough one, right? Because there's the whole technology side, which we have solved. We know what to do. We can do all that kind of stuff. Like you're saying, there's the intellectual property side, and there's the business side, which is how you capture people and money and revenue and support people and do all that stuff, right? And so there's a lot of work in AI to try to automate, some pieces of that, right? That's very interesting. And now there's the part that's automating the technology side of it, right? And like you were saying, like I said, we could just take someone's idea and dump it into the technology side and then Shazam, we've got a product. It's not perfect. So you got to have some people still to make it perfect, right? So that the business people can go and actually make a business, make it useful. So I think there's a big shift coming in like how resources will prioritize, right? So it used to be like you and I came from a world of like massive stacks of developers, right? This factory of people churning out code. That's done. I can't say that enough times, right? That is done. In 10 years from now, that's not even going to exist. They're going to laugh at us. Say, you did what?
Yeah.
No, nobody does that, right? And rightfully so, right? We are seeing automation now on the intellectual side, right? And we've seen automation on the business side, right? Which is even better, right? Because there's a lot of mundane stuff. But then you've got the real problem to solve now is the people problem, because if the people aren't doing stuff, right, they're not going to need the stuff that the business is trying to make. And so now we've got this catch-22 that we have to solve as well, right? And that's the real problem to solve.
So really, we almost need to go back to the old school kind of philosophies of barrier to entry. How do you keep your business safe? Right? What's keeping your customers to move to a different service, considering that different services software is probably going to be, a lot of competition. It can improve really quickly because they're also prompt engineering software. So in a world where that doesn't exist, kind of have to fall back to those old school business principles, right? Locking of vendors, contracts, social reputation, all those things. We might see a resurgence in old school marketing and branding stronger than ever before.
I think so. I think you're right. I think we're gonna have to see that, right? For sure. Until the notions of business start to change, right? The current way of how we do business isn't going to convey into the future, right? It's going to have to change. How that's going to change, I really don't know, right? Because the whole commerce model is going to have to change quite a bit, right? Because the whole value proposition's changing, right? The technology as value is going away. People as value used to be in the past, and now that kind of went away. So that's got to come back. That's where we get a lot of our value today is from people, not so much technology, But then I don't know what the future is going to look like. That's the hard part. Is like, where's the mix between those two that keeps them happy, right?
Well, the problem is also, I think we couldn't make this point strongly enough, is that when we said the future 10 years ago, it was 10, 20 years away. The future today is tomorrow. It's the next time that ChatGPT, Llama, Anthropic release a version that does something that we couldn't imagine. So it's, the whole time scales is just completely out of whack. The future is, and sometimes the future is right here. You just haven't heard about it yet, right? It's not evenly distributed. It's a quote, I think is Gladwell. So right. we're in this time of incredible ambiguity, right? But we're running software businesses. Who do you hire?
Right. That's the hardest part, right?
Is it the CS grads? I
Well, yeah,
mean,
absolutely. We have to do them right, right? Because we told them to go to school and get your degree in computer science, right? Knowing 8 years ago that this was happening. We still told them to go to get your CS degree. So we got to hire them, get them in here, teach them how to use this stuff, teach them how to use the LLMs, and teach them how to code and create not so much code, but we'll call it creating software systems using AI. If that's what they need to learn how to do, right? We know how to do it. They don't. We have to train them how to do it so that they can replace us so we can get out of the way, right? Because that's their future, not ours, right? Ours is kind of done. What mine is anyway. I'm a lot younger than you, or older than you, so
a little bit, yeah.
mine's pretty much done. Yours isn't yet. Theirs is just starting, and they're the ones that need to learn. So we got to do that for them. And then on their side, who are they going to hire? I don't think they're going to be hiring computer science people anymore. Right? I
Yeah.
think that's kind of a dead end. I think that's going to be more about like AI engineers, concept people, product people, people who can conceptualize useful products and then communicate with an AI to make that product. Right?
So the computer engineers that, and we've already heard the story, of this lady who finished, CS degree and then went to work at Walmart. She just couldn't find a job. And after 3 or 4 years of studying, that's horrific. Now, obviously, the universities are going to need to rewrite their agendas and syllabuses. That's going to have to happen. But
Yeah.
for those engineers, and until the universities catch up and they move slowly,
Mhm.
what are the computer science engineers that are fresh? How do they kind of jump into this new world and make themselves valuable?
Yeah, right. And so that's kind of on us, right? So have to bring them on as interns and just show them how to do stuff, right? Give them tools, right? Give them toys to play with, right? Because they're relearning stuff from scratch. So if they have the toys,
What would you do before you've kind of found that internship how do you kind of showcase yourself to be like, I'm the one you want to hire because you've got all these CS graduates that are thinking like, oh my God, there's all these other graduates. I want to get ahead of the curve. So before we, as the kind of businesses, give them that opportunity, what can they do?
yeah, what can a computer science graduate do today to make themselves stand out, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really hard. 'Cause there's a lot of them, right? It's a really big ocean, and it's hard to be seen, in that ocean. So we used to tell them to go get your GitHub, and create some open source stuff, and show people that you do, yeah, you know how to do stuff, right? And that's all fine, right? I mean, you can go and do that, right? You can go and say that you created these things, right? And then you can go on your LinkedIn or whatever and have a blog and start a podcast and do all these things, right? To try to do the whole social side, try to market
Right.
yourself, right? That requires a lot of time, right? And their time should be spent learning how to use these tools. So they should document how they're learning all these tools, right? So that's one way of doing it. But if everyone's documenting how they're learning the tools, then no one's going to watch them as they're documenting, right? And so you're like, well, no one's going to watch it anyway, so no one's going to know about it. And the hiring people don't have time to really watch a bunch of blog posts and YouTube channels and stuff like that.
Let me offer a scary idea. Tell me what you think. I told this to my kids, and as I told this to my kids, I was kind of shocking myself. There is a world or a future, I don't know if this is going to be true, where actually your reputation as a professional will be based on your social media followers. Because if you're creating high value educational content about whatever it is, AI or, agentic programming or math, if you have a strong followership, that indicates to the hiring manager that you are an authority. So are we maybe going into a mad world where your social media followers help you get a job? And I'll give you one example, which is maybe a little bit more straightforward. You know how authors are becoming authors today? The traditional book publishers are going to influencers who already have an audience, and
Mhm.
they're saying, "Oh, why don't you write a book?"
Hmm.
I mean, that's disheartening in many ways, but on the other hand, I mean, we've got to get with the times. I mean,
Yeah.
it seems like the future is going in a weird direction.
It is in a way, but I have some Gen Z kids, right?
Yeah.
They're just graduating from high school and they don't do anything social. In fact, they're very, we'll say, antisocial,
Mhm.
right? They see the whole social media side of life as very not authentic, right?
Right.
They see it as, people making stuff up, just trying to sell things. And rightfully so. That's kind of the whole point of it is to sell themselves, the influencer sells themselves,
Right.
right? That's what they're trying to sell. And so I do agree with you, Ari, that you're going to have a social imprint in the future. It's just like how that's going to be created, that has to be authentic, right? the real key is that, you can't be a social influencer and be an authority, right? I mean, they're kind of orthogonal. And so, you have to adopt that authority kind of methodology and mentality. And then you got to find a way to prove that you're an authority, right? In the sea of many authorities, including AI, right?
Right.
'Cause AI's out there as the authority now,
Right.
right? I mean, AIs know pretty much everything about everything,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, that's you say such a great. I mean, if we forget the answer and just stay in the question for a moment,
Mhm.
that's the question that all of the youngsters need to ask themselves. How do you prove your authority? I said, well, maybe it's through followers and the fact that you have an audience, but there's probably other ways to prove your authority. But I think if everyone in our audience who's young or
Mhm.
mid-career just asks themselves that question, how do I prove my authority? How do I show that I am one? I think that's probably going to be the key into the future.
Yeah, it is. I think so, fortunately, right? Because that means they have to focus on that, right? They gotta, like, foster that identity, they gotta spend a lot of time doing that, and we want people to spend their time on knowledge, being
Yeah.
good at something, right? And, being experts, not being socially great. And,
Yeah.
it just yeah, I don't know.
I love that you bring up that pushback because all these memes on LinkedIn about like a real professional and then a LinkedIn professional who's just tweeting about it but doesn't really know how to do the stuff. So,
Right.
obviously my answers they're not perfect and I love your pushback. It's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, well, there is no perfect, right? I mean, the real answer is that it depends on where you're at any given moment in time, right?
Yeah.
You're hiking up a mountain, right? And there is no answer to get up that mountain. You just have to one step at a time, look at where you're going and don't trip on a rock. That's
I love
it.
that. I love that. Jacob, what an absolute pleasure. It's so much fun to have you back on the
Mhm.
show again. One last final piece of advice to yourself, to our audience, to the new CS grads, what would you say?
Learn as much as you can about AI, right? Try to set stuff up at home, try to learn how to set it up at home because that's the future. People want you to be able to do that at home or in the office. Yeah. And just embrace it. Don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. Learn how to control it.
Yeah. Failure is just a stepping stone to the next step.
Right.
Jacob, thank you so much for joining the show. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Ari.